Hello everybody and welcome back to Tehillim Treasures, where every week in Mitzvah Shem we're going to learn 2 kapitles of Tehillim, get an idea of what's going on, what was David HaMelech talking about, and how we can relate to it. We are sponsored by 2 exceptional organizations every week. The first is Chazaq. Chazaq is an organization that has provided incredible Torah content, especially these last few years when we needed it, to be able to connect to the Rabbeinu Shalom, to better appreciate the Torah, to better appreciate our privilege to be the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation. Additionally, Chazaq's main work is to help children that are in public schools go to yeshivas, and you can contact them if you know of a child that is in need of a yeshiva at PSTY public school to yeshiva at chazaq.org. Our second sponsor is chickensforshabbos.com, where every single week there are those families of Melamdim, Rebbeim's children, Rebbeim's wives, who do not have enough to put food on the table, for agunis, for women who are nebuch alone, for grushas, for women who are divorced and they don't have where to turn, and they need food and they need clothing, they need people to help them with utilities and so much more. Please be generous in your donation to chickensforshabbos.com. This week we will be doing the 2 chapters of Perek Chav Gimel and Perek Chav Daled. And Perek Chav Gimel, again, a very, very famous kapitel. And in this kapitel, in this chapter, David HaMelech speaks about Hashem being with him every moment. V'gam ki eleich b'gei tzalmo ves lo yirara. Even when I go in the shadow of death, I am never afraid. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always with me. And in 1997, Reb Shalom Rafal Yehuda Stein, the son of Rav Chaim Stein, Zecher Tzaddik V'Kodesh Livracha, Reb Shalom Rafal Yehuda was only 43 years old, but he was very, very sick. He had been sick already for over 20 years. And his father sent him a birthday note. I guess even Gedolim will send birthday cards to their children. And he told him that there are 6 psukim that begin with the word Gam. Gam is Gematria 43. We've mentioned earlier that people have a minig to say the next kapitel of their life. In other words, if you're 17, you say the 18th chapter, in the 18th year of your life. So entering the 43rd year, so he gave him 6 psukim to be able to say with the word Gam, which is Gematria 43. And those 6 psukim were Gam Hashem Yitein HaTov, Hashem will provide that which is good. Gam Ani Oidcha Vichlei Nevel, I will also thank you on the stringed instrument. Gam l'shoyni kol hayoyim teget tzikosecha, my tongue too shall utter your righteousness all day long. Gam hu li lishua, he will also be my salvation. Gam kol koivecha lo yevoishu, also let none who hope in you be shamed. Gam ki eleich begeit salmoves lo irara. The Rabbeinu Shalom is always with me, so even when I walk in the shadow of death, I will not be afraid. The Rabbeinu Shalom is our shepherd. You know, there's a beautiful, beautiful story with the Heilige Rizhiner. The Rizhiner was a great tzaddik and a great rebbe, and he had an unusual practice. He lived in an opulent lifestyle. He had a magnificent home and beautiful chariots. He had magnificent boots that he wore. But his boots were unlike most beautiful, luxurious boots. His boots had no soul to them. Why? He wasn't looking to live a very indulgent lifestyle. He was looking to be a vehicle for the gaiva, the kedusha, for the beauty and glory of Hashem. His own personal comfort was irrelevant. I don't know if he slept in a bed at night, but the Rizhiner was a vehicle for HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Shechina to be here on this world. And the story goes that the Rizhiner was imprisoned. He was put in prison, and the Rizhiner was Nebuch. And again, imagine this person of regal countenance. He's somebody who's a very, very special person. He dresses like a melech, like a king. He has a beautiful bekesha. He has beautiful clothing. And they threw him into a dank, dark dungeon with rats. It was terrifying. It was disgusting. It was depressing. It was cold and miserable. And the Rizhiner was there for weeks at a time, maybe even months. And no one was allowed to see him. Finally, 2 Gaboim were able to bribe the government officials that they would be able to see the Rizhiner. And they came in and they burst out crying. Just seeing the Rebbe sitting there, a melech, a king, sitting in such darkness and such depression, they saw him crying, they just burst out crying. And he looked at them and he said, "Oh, why are you crying?" And they said, "Rebbe, just look at you. It's a terribly sad situation. We feel your pain. You yourself are crying." And the Rizhiner said, "I am not crying for my own pain. I am not crying for my own sadness. But the pasuk says, Gam ki elech begeit salmoves. Even when I walk in the shadow of death, lo yira, I will not be afraid." And he put the comma after ira. I'm not going to be afraid. Rabbi, why is it bad? Why am I crying? Ki ato imodi. Hashem, I know you haven't left me at this moment. But why do you have to suffer with me? I have to be here for my own averis. There's a reason why I have to be here. But you, Rabbeinu Shalom, you should never have to suffer. And I'm crying for the pain of the Shechina. It's only natural that when we go through difficult times, that certainly we're terrified, and sometimes we will cry. But if we can, then we take one moment, one pocket of time, and we think to ourselves, if we're in such pain, just imagine what pain HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in. A father, when his child is hurting, is even in more pain than the child. And if we'd realize that Hashem's even in more pain, then perhaps that would diminish our suffering just a little bit. And that would serve as a schus that in Yitz Hashem we can emerge from that darkness. We can be freed from our own prisons, from our own dungeons, and we can live happy and wonderful lives. The second kapitel that we're doing today is also a famous kapitel. We say it every Sunday as the Shir Shel Yom. We say it every Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos by Mincha when we bring back the Sefer Torah. And even though those 3 times seem to be like it's in the end of a davening and it's when the Torah is being brought back, it seems to be almost like a secondary tefillah. But then on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur night by Ma'ariv, we say this exalted prayer. And all of a sudden you're saying it pasuk by pasuk, and you pay much more attention then. Full disclosure, when I say it Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I think to myself, maybe I should be paying better attention by the Sunday Shir Shel Yom and by Monday and Thursday and Shabbos by Mincha when we say the chapter. Nevertheless, let's look inside. Let's see what this kapitel is all about. Let's try to better appreciate this chapter, Perek Chav Daled. LeDavid Mizmor L'Hashem Haaretz U'Mlaya Tevel V'Yoshveiva. Reb Shamshon Hirsch says that instead of saying the more common usage that we've used many times, which is Mizmor LeDavid, here we use the expression of LeDavid Mizmor. Why is the expression in inverted form over here? Why is it opposite the normal way of saying it? And Reb Shamshon of Hirsch says that David was already feeling greatly inspired prior to the composition of this song, as opposed to the other Mizmarim where it says Mizmar LeDavid, because then those kapitluch were written to raise his spirits. When was this Mizmar composed? David HaMelech was bringing a korban on Harai Moriah, and Hashem appeared to him and told him that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built on this very spot where you're bringing a korban. David HaMelech, you should know that the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built on this very, very spot. And he wanted to say it. So that's when he first composed it. But he wanted it to be said when the Aron would be brought into the Kodesh Kodashim. And that's the reason why when we bring back the Sefer Torah, we say this capital, as we bring back the Sefer Torah into the Aron Kodesh, that's when we say this capital, just like David HaMelech did. It's also said as the Shir Shal Yom we said, Hashem ruled on Sunday, on Yom Rishon. Hashem ruled alone on this world, and we recognize on day one, when there's nothing in this world except the Rabbeinu Shalom and light and darkness, there's no better time to appreciate that Hashem is running this world. There's also a tefillah of Parnasa, we say. We say that when you say it, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur night, you should know that there's a school to say it for Parnasa. Once again, La Shema Aretz Umloya, Hashem has everything inside of the world. Tevel v'yoshveva. Hashem owns everything and He has everything. We're only a small part of His world, and Hashem can give us money in an instant. It was World War II, and the Brisker Rav was no longer able to go back to Brisk. It was too dangerous, so he stayed in Warsaw and Warsaw. And he was staying on the 7th floor of an apartment building, and there was a rich man who invited him to stay on the 1st floor. He stocked his apartment with a lot of supplies, and that rich man only ate very little because he never knew when the war was going to end. But the Brisker Rav had the opposite approach. He only had a few pieces of bread for himself, but he ate as much as he felt he had to. He wasn't worried. He was confident that Hashem would bring an end to the war whenever he was ready to, and whatever the experts said meant nothing. He never saved for the next day. But the rich man with endless supplies was eating only a little bit. The Brisker Rav, who had very little, ate up everything. Look at the irony. Who's really the rich man? Well, it was the 8th day of Tishrei, right before Yom Kippur. And the Brisker Rav came into another city. And they encouraged him to save one piece of bread for the next day, the 9th day, Erev Yom Kippur. First of all, it was the day before a fast, and you need to eat in order to have your strength. And there's a special mitzvah as well, because Erev Yom Kippur, and there's a mitzvah to fast on Yom Kippur, but there's the same mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. It's part of the mitzvah of fasting on Yom Kippur. So against his better judgment, even though the Rav always had a policy, eat everything you can, because he had full bitachon that the war is going to end, the Rav saved one piece of bread for the next day. The next morning on Erev Yom Kippur, a package arrived from the town baker, who heard that there was a big tzaddik that had come, and he saved him the special bread that had been baked in accordance with the highest standards of halacha. When he received the package, the Rav looked inside and he said, "See, there was no reason for me to save the bread. Man had fallen from heaven." And the messenger who brought the bread added one thing. He said he was also given a container of fish. But because of the bombs, he had to walk to the Rav's apartment. He was afraid. And in his hurryingness, because he was hurrying, he dropped the container of fish and he couldn't get the container again. And the Rav thanked him. And he said, "I want you to know it's not your fault, it's my fault. If I wouldn't have saved a piece of bread, then I would have had all the shefa from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The only reason that you dropped that container is because I didn't have full bitachon. If we fully believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of our parnasa, then the man will fall from heaven. The fish will arrive together with the bread. If we're saving for the bread and we don't have full bitachon, the Brisker Rav said, then we won't get it. And that's the reason why this kapitel, the David Mizmar, which is recited at the most exalted moments, will remember the very special message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who created the world on Yom Rishon, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is the one that protects us and judges us on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, He is the one that provides our parnasa as well. Until next time, sei gesund and be well.